Yeah, g'day guys, Steve here from Dirt Bike ADV. Sunday morning out in the shed again. I seem to spend a bit of time out in the shed, don't I? It's nice and peaceful out here, as anyone will attest to that's been married for 25 or 30 odd years. This is part 2 of a series I'm doing on building a lightweight adventure bike, buying and building a lightweight adventure bike with a focus on a tight budget. This all come about because I bought this bike because I've got a 78 Falcon out there that I'm in the process of restoring, coming into the dear end of the spectrum. So I'm trying to save a bit of money, leave a bit of cash in the bank. Ended up saying, well, I'll sell the Churco and buy a cheaper bike. And as it was, I went to a Vinduro event and thought that looks like a lot of fun. So I got an older bike that I can enter in the Vinduro. But of course, I still get my lightweight adventure bike and my dual sport, if you like, that I can ride a little bit of single trail, do some camping off and just general riding up in the fire trails in the bush up where I live here. So that's how it come about. Plus I've had a hip operation, so I've got a bit of time on my hands at the moment, so I can sort of devote a bit of time to pushing out a few videos, which I quite enjoy. So I do enjoy the process, so it gives me something to do that I can do while I'm sitting there letting my hip recover. So this video is all about buying a second-hand bike. I'm going to grab the camera in a minute and I'm going to have a walk around my TT350 here. And just have a really quick, it's not going to be a long video, just a real quick look on what to look for when you're walking around a bike and buying a second-hand bike. Obviously we're into the tighter end of the market. We're trying to build an adventure bike with a pretty tight budget, particularly good for blokes with young families and people just in general that, a bit like myself, you know, can I afford to go buy a brand new bike? Of course I can. I can go pay cash for a brand new bike if I want to. Can I justify it? Probably not, you know. If this sits and doesn't get ridden for 3 months, I'm not going to worry. I haven't got a $30,000 bike or a $20,000 bike sitting in the shed that's not getting used. I've got a $2,500 bike that's sitting in the shed not getting used. So that's part of it. It's not just about, you know, having the money. It's about just being sensible with your money, so to speak. So we're going to grab the camera, as I said, walk around, and we're going to talk about lots of different things to look for. Just remember, in society, mate, 95% of people are honest. And, you know, it's very rare that people actually do dodgy shit. They do, it does happen, and we all hear about them. But my experience with buying second-hand bikes over the last 10 years has been really positive. I've made a lot of friends and guys that I'm still in contact with that I've sold bikes or bought bikes off. And, you know, I've never had a bad bike yet. Touch wood, you know, eventually it's the law of averages, it will happen. But if you're a little bit astute and take your time to walk around the bike and just get a feel for the situation, then you can sort of eliminate most of the risks, so to speak. So, yeah. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to walk around the bike and we'll have a bit of a chat about what we reckon's the things to look for when buying a second-hand bike. Righto, so you've found a bike online, Marketplace, Craigslist, Gumtree. I'm not sure of all the things, all the places you can buy second-hand motorbikes, but certainly in Australia it's mainly Marketplace now on Facebook. We've got Bike Sales, which is an online, you know, proper structured website, and we've got things like Gumtree as well. But certainly you found the bike, you've arranged to come and have a look. So you're at old mate's place and you've walked into his shed and you're walking around the bike. One of the things I like to do, I like to have actually look around the shed. Now, excuse my shed, it's a bit messy. I'm doing a bit of work on a couple of bikes at the moment. But I like to actually have a look around the shed and say, oh yeah, right, okay. So he's got filter oil sitting down there, right. I can't see it here, but I've got engine oil sitting around there. I can see some oil filters sitting over on the bench. And I go, righto, this guy does a bit of maintenance. He's not just riding the thing until it blows up. So he's reasonably organised, he's got tools hanging on the wall, so this guy's probably going to be on top of his maintenance, hopefully. And then obviously talk to him about, you know, what the history is of the bike and that sort of stuff, and you'll get a feel for it. I mean, it's just common sense really, guys. Get a feel for it. Whether you think he's done some servicing on it. So obviously the next thing, and some bikes won't have odometers, but the next thing is just have a look at the kilometres. Like a car, we always base our values on how many kilometres it's done. This says it's done 19,000 kilometres. And I'm looking at the bike and I go, right, has it done 19,000 kilometres? And I start to look at my wear points. If it says it's done 1,500 kilometres up there, you go, gee, it's an old bike to have only done 1,500 kilometres. Maybe the speedo was disconnected. Ask the guy, you know, is the kilometres accurate? That sort of stuff, you know, and just sort of try and get a feel for it. But I look at this bike and I go, right, 19,000 kilometres, okay. Bit of play in the stand, fair bit of wear on the foot pegs. Fair bit of wear on the gear change. Bit of scratching on the case. Paint's off here. Oh yeah, that's probably about right. To me, this bike looks like it's done 19,000 Ks. Now this bike particularly hasn't been off-road, I'd say. It still had the original wheel bearings, and some of the wheel bearings weren't even sealed wheel bearings. So I'd say I've been lucky with this one. It hasn't been off-road much. Next thing to do, have a look for missing parts. You know, oh, there's a side cover missing. Actually, it's not missing. It's just sitting over there. I've taken it off just to show you the air filter. Have a quick walk around, look for missing parts, cut wires and that sort of stuff, and start to get a feel for the general condition of the bike. And then we'll probably go into, you know, the mechanical side of the bike. So we walk around the bike and you say, oh yeah, headlights there, shrouds are there, all the shrouds are there, all the plastics are there, righto. And remember, this is this bike's actually a 29-year-old bike, so this is not a good example. Mostly, I'd encourage you to buy bikes that are less than 20 years old. But this bike is actually, I was very lucky, it's very original. It's all original exhausts and everything like that. And I go, yeah, it all seems to be there. You know, no broken levers. So the bike's in good condition and it all seems to be there, so that's good. Looks like the kilometres match the wear and tear marks on the bike, so pretty happy with that. But now we get into the mechanical side of it. We say, righto, luckily for me, this bike's up on a stand, so I get to check the bearings. Get to wobble the wheel. Head stem, try and see if there's any movement in the head stem. There's nothing there, all good. Do the same with the rear. See if there's a bit of movement in the wheel bearings. Wheel the side, wheel backwards and forwards. I've actually replaced the wheel bearings on this one. Again, see if there's any movement in the swing arm. If none of that moves and that all looks good, that tells you that the bike's had a bit of maintenance done, which is good. Bearings aren't deal breakers. If the wheel's a bit wobbly, you go, oh, well, I can replace bearings. A set of bearings is $30, $40 for a set of wheel bearings for the front or rear. Not a deal breaker, but just so you know, like there's nothing worse. You get, oh shit, I've got to do the wheel bearings on this. Oh no. If you start finding a few little niggles like that, might be wheel bearings, might be head stem bearings, you go, well, it's not a big expense, but I do need to allow that with my time on, getting this bike up and ready to ride, so to speak. So again, wheel bearings, not a big deal breaker. There is probably one deal breaker, and that's the air filter. If you look in the airbox here, and this is why I've got the side cover off, and you don't see that air filter in good condition, start to get really sceptical, because that's one of the most critical things in a bike, that and oil changes. If it's got a sight window on it, see if you can have a look in the sight window and see if it's got some fresh oil. If it's got reasonably, the oil's not black, that's a good sign. If it's got some reasonably fresh oil in it, the air filter's in good condition, that's a really good thing. If the air filter's not in good condition, it hasn't been fitted properly, chances are it's dusted, it's got air and grit and dirt into the engine and gets into the valve trains on 4-strokes and just absolutely stuffs them. They become what they call dusted, so that's a big thing to look at. We can't look inside the engine, guys, so that's one of the big telltale things. See what the oil condition's like, see what the air filter's condition is like. If both of those look reasonable, you've got half a chance. Continuing on the engine, you probably need to start the bike when it's cold. Well, you don't probably do. You need to start the bike when it's cold. So feel the engine, make sure old mate hasn't started, because it's a big of a thing to start. And feel the engine, and even tell him when you come in to have a look at it, don't start it, I want to start it cold. And when you start the bike up, listen for the rattles. Typically, if a bike's been sitting for a while, and it's not always the case, but with some bikes and some cars, if it's been sitting for a while, it'll take a while to pick up the oil, to splash the oil around, or the oil pump to get going. And so you listen to it, and it might rattle a little bit, sound a bit sick for a couple of seconds, and you go, on up, there's the oil's risen up there. If it's been ridden recently, it shouldn't be the case, of course. If it's been ridden in the last 2 or 3 weeks, then the oil pressure should be fine from the start. But just have a listen to the engine. It's a little bit hard with some of the KTMs. They do sound like a rattling buck of bolts, some of the KTMs. But most of the Japanese manufacturers, the engines are quite smooth sounding. You won't hear any tappet noise or any bloody rattling sounds coming from a Japanese bike generally as a rule. And most of the other Europeans are good. It's just some of the KTMs. It's not a fault. It's just the KTM 500s particularly just do sound a little bit rattly by default. But if you hear any loose rattles when you rev it and all that sort of stuff, then that's alarm bells. That's the expensive part. We can buy a plastic, we can buy a wheel bearing, we can buy a gator for a shock, but you know, when you have to start working on the engine, then the price becomes secondary because it can get really expensive. So obviously get him to start it when it's cold, and then you basically get a bit of a feel for it. Take it for a ride. These TT350s had a history of blowing third gear. They did have an issue with third gear. It's very rare that you have problems like that, but I always suggest taking it for a ride, and you don't have to take it for a big ride necessarily, but just take it through all the gears, go through every single gear. Nothing worse than getting out in the road and finding you can't get sixth, and because sixth is gone or something like that. As I say, with these bikes, the third gear was a bit of an issue, so I made sure I went through all the gears on this bike. Things like brakes can be replaced easily. So if you find the brakes are a little bit bloody spongy, that might need new discs. Mine needed a new disc and new pads, but again, not a deal breaker. When I looked at this bike, I walked around, I thought, oh yeah, probably a disc and pads. Probably end up being brake shoes in the rear, but it wasn't. The brake shoes were fine, you know, and a couple of other things I had to put indicators on. So I sort of quickly added it up in my head and I go, yep, no, this is still a really good buy. So that's what it sort of comes down to, guys. You know, just have a look at the general condition of the bike. Try and match the kilometres with the condition of the bike, and so you've got a good indication of how many kilometres are done. If the speedo doesn't work, if the hour meter, there's no hours meter, as I say, look at the wear points like the foot pegs, paint off the frame, wiggly stands, all that sort of stuff. Just look for the wear and tear, and that will help, you know, ascertain whether that bike's done a whole bucket load of kilometres or it hasn't, so to speak. So look at the wear points, look for missing parts, look for cut wires, just look at the general condition of the bike. You'll soon see that just by walking around, and try and make it a decision that's not based on emotion. Don't get all excited and just hand the money over and roll out the door. Take a deep breath, just say, calm down. There's plenty of other bikes. If I don't want to buy this one, there's plenty of other bikes on the market. And just have a nice sort of, a casual, slow walk around. As I say, check for parts, check air filters, check oil, and check wear and tear parts like bearings and all that sort of stuff. And you should be okay. And like I say, start it cold, take it for a run, and that's about all you can do. There is buyer beware with second-hand bikes, guys. If this one blew up tomorrow, I would not ring the owner. I would not have a problem. I say, well, it's a 29-year-old bike, so be it. I was just the unlucky one that owned it when it blew up. So, you know, you can't sort of mitigate all your risk. There is risk in buying second-hand bikes. But as I say, $2,500 for this bike as compared to going and buying a new 350, which are about between sort of $14,000 and $17,000 at the moment. So a considerable saving there. And for me, as I said all along, there's a bit of a novelty effect for this bike as well too. But anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. As I say, this is part of a series. The next series will be actually working on your bike, what tools you need, and the basic maintenance items I do. I call them the 5 essential service items that I like to do on my bikes. I don't tend to get involved in too technical stuff. Probably wouldn't check the valve clearances on this bike, do a rebuild. I'd probably just take it to a motorcycle mechanic, but certainly changing tyres and, you know, wheel bearings and chains and sprockets and doing work on the electrical system, all that we should be able to do. So the next video is going to be about all those sort of easier maintenance items that you can do yourself. And then from there we'll go on to talk about camping gear and camping gear and luggage and setting your bike up, and eventually when my hip gets better we'll do our first camping trip off the L350. So looking forward to that, I can tell you already. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Each time I make one of these videos, I'm getting closer and closer and closer to seeing you out on the trail soon.